Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Mac Story.
Thanks for stopping by the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast today. So today we made it to the halfway point. Once we finish this episode, we're halfway through this 30-part series on my book, Blue Collar Leadership and Teamwork, 30 Traits of High Impact Players. So today we're at trait 15, which is be open-minded. The subtitle for this chapter is There's Always Another Way. Obviously, that means if you're open-minded. If you're closed-minded, maybe there's only your way and nobody else knows any better way of doing things. I'm just cutting up with you. But that's the way it is with some people. It's their way or no way. So let's start off today with a quote from Walt Disney. Walt had this to say. He said, "We keep moving forward, opening new doors, and doing new things because we are curious. And curiosity keeps leading us down new paths." So that's pretty good stuff. And we talked a lot about curiosity in the last episode, Be Teachable. And it rolls into being open-minded. Just like many of these traits, they go together. And many of these traits, really, you can't, a lot of these traits, they don't stand alone. You have to take several traits, put them together to be able to live and apply a specific trait, like being open-minded. You got to be a lot of things to be open-minded. Being open-minded is basically a term that describes many other traits when they're put together in a collective form. But anyway, where there's a will, there is a way. How about this? Where there's a team, there will be many ways. And high-impact leaders can handle a team that's got many ideas. Low-impact leaders, they just want to tell them what to do. They don't want them to rock the boat and come up with new ideas. But we're talking about how do you become a high-impact player. You got to be open-minded. That means your teammates are going to have ideas too. Just because you may become a high-impact player, it doesn't mean you're the only one that has any ideas. And although there could be some low-impact players on your team that don't work well with others, that don't value personal growth and leadership development, that does not mean they can't have a good idea. Anybody can have a good idea. But often people miss good ideas from low-impact team players because they're not open-minded. It's a weakness. Some high-impact players, being a high-impact player doesn't mean you're perfect. Some high-impact players are not open-minded. They think they got the best ideas. High-impact players aren't always simply looking for a solution. A truly high-impact player, they're not always simply looking for a solution. They are focused on finding the best solution. If you're familiar with the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that I talk about, my favorite book of all time, the one that changed my life. Well, the book didn't change my life, but applying what I learned in that book changed my life, transformed my life. Habit 6 in that book is synergy. Synergy is where you work with others effectively to come up with a better idea than either one of you could have by yourself. To get the benefits of Habit 6, synergy, you've got to be open-minded. You want to come up with the best solution, you've got to be open-minded. I'm going to tell you what, closed-minded people, they don't come up with the best solution. They may come up with a solution. They may come up with an effective solution. It's very, very, very doubtful that anybody on their own can come up with the best solution. because everybody's got some ideas. Everybody sees things different. It takes a team to come up with the best solution. And that's what high impact players are doing. They're out there being open-minded, always asking, is there another way, a better way? Actually, they're asking, is there another way? Once they identify there is another way, then they want to know, is it a better way? And then if it's a better way, they're trying to figure out how we make this happen. That's just who we are. That's who high impact players are. They don't settle for the status quo. They're trying to make things better, themselves and the processes that they interact with. As Stephen M.R. Covey stated, now you got to remember, Stephen M.R. Covey is not the Stephen Covey that wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That was Stephen R. Covey, his father. But I'm talking about the son right here, Stephen M.R. Covey, the son of Stephen R. Covey. Now, Stephen M.R. Covey wrote my third favorite book, which is The Speed of Trust. He says trust is the one thing that changes everything. And that's a great book. If you're wondering what my number 2 book is, since I didn't mention it, it's in the middle. It's The 5 Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell. So, Stephen M.R. Covey stated, openness is vital to integrity. It takes both humility and courage. Humility to acknowledge that there are principles out there you may not currently be aware of, and courage to follow them once you discover them. So those are the words of Stephen M.R. Covey. What's interesting is I wasn't even thinking about that quote, or I hadn't read that quote, actually. I had it, but I hadn't read it when I was talking earlier about how all the traits tie together. But that quote, actually, he talks about it, how openness is vital to integrity, and then to have openness, it takes humility and it takes courage. And he described it in his quote, humility to acknowledge that there are principles out there you may not currently be aware of, and then courage to follow them once you discover them. That's why I pull that quote out. I'm sure it's in the book, but I pull that quote out to add into this podcast. And I'm just going to look real quick. I'll grab my book right here and see if it's in there. I don't see it with a real quick scan. That's one reason I tell you guys, the podcast though is not always like the book, and I'm definitely not reading the book. And again, it doesn't have anything about Blue Collar Bob on my podcast, but there's a lot of that in the book. But I don't see this quote. So when I created a lesson around this, that's what I do to create these podcast series. I've got some teaching lessons that I put together years ago for these books. And so I just pull out the lesson and I just talk about the points that I put on the lesson. And sometimes in those lessons, I add additional quotes or thoughts or something that's actually not in the book. So that's why I had to go back and check that out and see. But I don't see that quote from Stephen M.R. Covey in the book, although it would have made a really great one to be in the book. And I may not have ever even read that quote when I wrote the book. It's just the way it works. Anyway, high impact players intentionally ask their teammates questions, not only to learn, but also to promote deeper thinking and shared ideas. Deeper thinking and shared ideas. That's what high impact players do. They ask questions. High impact leaders ask questions. Again, not only to learn, but also to promote deeper thinking and shared ideas. So let's talk about low impact players. Then we're going to come back to high impact players. Low impact players compete with one another. Because they're competing instead of completing, they want to provide the solution in order to get the credit. That's what low impact players and leaders, they want the credit. Closed-minded people reject ideas from others. It's their way or no way. See, if I'm a closed-minded person and I accept your idea, then you're going to get some credit for the idea. And your idea may be better than my idea. So then if I'm open to others' ideas, then I'm setting myself up where a lot of times I don't get credit. Other people get credit. If I'm a high impact player, I don't care who gets the credit. I just want to find and discover the best solution and implement it. I want results. I don't want credit. And by the way, when I'm sharing with you, even from my lessons that I've created, they're just a few bullet points. They're nothing too much. But I add a lot of content and context. It's not in a lesson. It's not like a big drawn out lesson. I don't have a script or anything like that. I just got some bullet points on my lesson. None of my podcasts are scripted. If they had to be scripted, I wouldn't do them. I like to talk about whatever I want to talk about when I sit down and record a podcast. Now let's go back and talk about high impact players. High impact players, remember, low impact players compete with one another, but high impact players complete one another. They don't focus on getting credit, although they are given a lot of credit. High impact players get a lot of credit. Sometimes they're given too much credit. Other times, high impact players are given credit for things they didn't even do. However, the key point is high impact players don't seek credit. And if they know they're getting credit for something they didn't do, they're going to divert that credit to the person who deserves it, the person who earned it. So due to their humility, even when high impact players deserve the credit, they still attempt to pass it on to their teammates. You know, when I used to be leading process improvement teams, those week-long Kaizen events, if you've heard me talk about those in the past, you know, I was a consultant. I went in there. They hired me to lead those teams to get results. I did that very effectively. But I don't want the credit. I don't deserve the credit. The team did all the work to get the credit. But a lot of consultants, when they get done at the end of the week, they want to present what the team did to the leaders. They want to present to the leaders what the team accomplished that week. The consultants want to try to get the credit. They'll get up there and talk. Some of them don't get anybody else involved. The consultant shares, does like a final presentation to the owners or the CEO or the top leaders, whoever brought them in. The consultant wants to make sure to give them a presentation. And a lot of times, the people on the team don't really want to talk anyway. A lot of times, those team members will be glad that the consultant did that. But the consultant is not doing it to be nice to the people because they don't want to talk. The consultant that does like that is trying to get credit. And then you got some consultants, they kind of do a hybrid. They want to lead the final presentation so they can be seen as the leader of this week's event or that week's event, if you're talking about the past. And they'll kind of say most things, and then they'll call on people to talk, people who were participating in the event. So they'll give them some stage time, if you want to call it that. Give them some of the spotlight, let them share what they did and that sort of thing. But I never did either one of those things. I got in the back of the room. I led the event. I led the team through developing the presentation, getting all that squared away, and helping them learn how to present that information, if they needed it, how to sequence it, what they needed to say. We did dry runs. They would walk through, because a lot of times they were nervous. They had never spoken about like anything like that. Some of them don't like speaking in front of people. A lot of them are nervous to speak to the leaders. But that's what they did. I made sure they got the credit. I was in the back of the room. I didn't even speak unless they just called on me to share something that they didn't have an answer to, but very seldom did that happen. I told them, I don't want to, this is not about Mac's story. This is about you guys. So I sat at the very back of the room And I watched the presentation with everyone else. And I was trying to do what I just taught you about right there. Give them credit. Yes, they couldn't have done that without me. If they could have, they would have already done it. But the people who hired me to come in there, they hired me because they knew that I knew how to do that. That's why I was there. I don't need any more credit than that. They hired me to do it. That's all the credit I need. They believed in me. Now I need to get out of the way and let the team shine. But going back to that event, during the entire week, I had to coach and mentor that team. And again, I use that term loosely. On Monday, they were never really a team. It took the whole week to build this team up. And by Friday, when they did that final presentation, they were always a team. It's just an awesome thing that I got to do that so long. I logged 11,000 hours doing that from 05 to 2012, 2005 to 2012. But I had to help them be open-minded because a lot of those folks had never had any leadership development or personal development. I had to do all this stuff on the fly. I'm having to lead the team. I'm having to coach the team. I'm having to mentor the team. I'm having to teach the team. And I'm having to coach them when and how and why, most importantly, to get them to buy in to these traits that I'm teaching you in this book. And again, I have a book that teaches you how did I actually do that during those events. It's called Blue Collar Kaizen, Leading Lean and Lean Teams. But we'd be coming, the whole focus of our event was always some type of improvement relative to processes. So everybody had ideas, especially the person who worked in the area that we were trying to improve. And I would always help people understand that that person's ideas carries the most weight, the most value. But it does not mean we have to go with their idea, because someone who's never been in that work area could have a better idea than the person who works in there every day. But that's not the norm. That's abnormal, but it could happen, and it has happened. So I got to teach most of the team to be open-minded, that the person who works in that space has a lot of ideas, and they know a lot of things that need to happen. I have to teach the person and help the person that works in the space to be open-minded and realize people outside of the area, including me from outside of the company, could have an idea to help them. And the way I would do that, just to give you a snapshot out of how I did that to get these folks to work together to improve processes, the first 4 hours on Monday morning was dedicated to the kind of content I'm teaching you on my podcast. Growing and developing the people. I talked about mindset a few episodes ago. That's the first thing I worked on when I started leading a team, was getting the mindset right. So it would almost be, it was very intentional. It wasn't this specific content that I'm teaching you at the moment, but it was related to being open-minded. It was related to synergy for sure, and a whole lot of other things that I'm not talking about during this episode. But I'd be teaching them, getting their mindset right, asking them questions, getting them talking, getting all the junk out of their mind that they normally deal with and normally operate on. And then we go out and we kill it. And then, that's on Monday morning, first 4 hours. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, the first hour or so each morning. Try to get the team back in gear with the right mindset and do a little snapshot of personal growth and leadership development to kick off the morning. So I'm going to leave you with a quote. Actually, I ain't done yet, but at the moment, I'm going to leave you with this quote from Dale Carnegie. He said, "The successful person will profit from their mistakes and try again in a different way." Dale Carnegie. So basically, he's talking about learning from our mistakes and try again in a different way. If you're growth oriented, if you're open-minded, if you're teachable, a lot of these traits that I've been sharing with you, if you can apply those traits, you're going to be the kind of person who learns from your mistakes and tries again in a different way. You have that beginner's mindset we talked about previously. So back when I was young, I was not very open-minded. And guess who I hung around with? Other folks who were not open-minded. We all thought we had all the answers. What I know now is we didn't have really any of the answers. We were not near as smart and sharp as we thought we were. But in the old days, I'm talking about, I'm 53 now, so in my late teens, early 20s, you couldn't tell me nothing. It didn't matter what. If someone would have taught me the things I'm sharing and teaching you now, I always say I wish I would have known them back then, but I don't know if I was open-minded enough to even accept it. I'd like to think if I had a good leader or someone who is a good speaker and connect with people, if I went to a conference or if they would have brought someone into our plant, like Rhea and I go into their manufacturing plants or inside their organization, their companies, and talk to the people. We seem to do a real good job of motivating and inspiring and engaging people who've never heard this type stuff to get engaged. And sometimes these are hardcore folks who are not open-minded. But we help them understand why being open-minded can benefit them. That's what you have to do. You have to help people understand how is any of this stuff going to benefit you. That's the key to being able to influence people to begin to grow and develop themselves, those people who are not used to it. So I'd like to think if someone would have ever got in front of me like that they could have cracked the shell and got through to me. I don't know if they could have or not, but I'd like to think I wasn't that closed-minded, but maybe I was. But, when we talk about being open-minded, I'm going to ask you the question I usually ask you. Imagine you could pick a teammate to work with. The boss says, I'm going to hire one of these two people. All I'm going to tell you about them is one of them's open-minded, the other one's closed-minded. Which one would you pick to work with? Obviously, common sense says you're going to pick the open-minded person. Who wants to work with a closed-minded person? But remember that most important question. Which one are you? Again, not which one do you think you are. Which one are you? What would other people say? People at home, they may say you're open-minded. People you work with, though, they may say you're closed-minded. Or if you're a boss, some people at work that you're not the boss of, they might say you're open-minded. People that report to you, they may say you're closed-minded. What you got to understand, though, anyone who perceives you to be closed-minded, you're losing a lot of influence with those people. It doesn't matter where they're at. You're in the center, 360 degrees around you. People above you, beside you, below you, however you want to see it. Anybody who perceives you to be closed-minded, you're losing a lot of influence with those people. So they don't even want to talk to you. And they probably don't want you talking to them. But if you're their boss, they probably have to listen. But they don't have to share ideas with you. People, Andy Stanley said it best, leaders who don't listen will soon find themselves surrounded by people who have nothing to say. Leaders often think, why won't my team talk to me? I hear leaders, how do I get people to share their ideas? Well, you listen to them. Then you implement some of their ideas. And if their ideas are not good enough for you, ask them some questions. Don't say, nah, that won't work. We're going to do this. Whatever this is, if you're a good enough leader and your idea is the best idea, you can ask the team questions until they can come to that same conclusion as you. And then guess what? It's their idea. Guess what else? They'll own their idea. They're not going to own your idea. So high-impact leaders of people slow down to go fast. They ask lots of questions. But remember, we're talking about high-impact players. Doesn't matter what your position is. You still can ask a lot of questions. You could be in conflict with your team because they got an idea and you think your idea is best. Instead of trying to force your idea on them, ask them some questions. They still might not want to talk to you. If they don't trust you at all, they don't want you asking them questions. So you got to go if you're in that condition, you got to go do a whole lot of groundwork on developing your character so you can develop relationships with those people. Because if you've got conflict with people and you can't resolve it, that means you've got a lot of character work to do. Now, I ain't saying that can you influence these people to think like you think. You may not be able to do that. Some people may not care what you think and how you think and never want to do any thinking like you think. But purely building a relationship with coworkers, instead of thinking they have to come to you, guess what you got to do? You've got to go to them. Now, it doesn't mean you have to go get outside of your character. You don't have to do things that cause you to have bad character or cause you to lose integrity. You don't have to do any of that stuff. I build relationships with a whole lot of people that don't have a high degree of character. They do a whole lot of stuff I don't do and I'm never going to do. But I can still build a relationship with them because the first thing I do is stop trying to get them to come to me. As soon as I know they don't want to come to me, if I want to build a relationship, what I know is I've got to go to them in a way that allows me to maintain my integrity at whatever level I want to maintain my integrity at. A lot of people don't have that ability. They think you can't do it. That's because they don't know what they don't know. If they actually knew, they'd be doing it. And a lot of time you may have so much distrust built up over time that it takes you months or years to build up enough trust. If you quit getting them to come to you and you start going to them, it still could take you months or years and potentially never. But to even have a chance, you've got to go apply the right principles. And actually, it's habit 5 of the 7 habits. Seek first to understand, then be understood. But again, a lot of people, seek first to understand, then be understood. Habit 5 from the 7 habits. It takes an open-minded person to do that. I'm going to try to understand you first. Closed-minded people I want you to understand me, and I ain't even worried about understanding you. Because I know I'm right and you're wrong. Well, guess what? Even if I know I'm right and you're wrong, if I want to build a relationship with you, I'm going to seek first to understand you. That does not mean I'm going to agree with you. I'm just trying to understand you. And if you feel understood, if you feel I'm trying to understand you, and eventually you do feel I understand you, you're going to trust me more. But I'm going to have to also help you understand. Just because I understand you doesn't mean I agree with you. A lot of people, they can't apply that trait in their life. They can write it down, they can tell you all about it, but they can't apply it. To know and not do is not to know. To understand and not apply is not to understand. All these principles, anybody can read them. Anybody can memorize it. You want to become a high-impact team player, you've got to learn how to apply it in your life so that you can get results and your team can get results and you can help other people have a better life. And while you're doing all that, your life's going to get better. That's my goal on these podcasts. One of many is to help you have a better life at home and at work. And one more thing, if you're a leader, you're trying to implement this type content out with your people, trying to transform the culture, the number one thing you got to do to have any chance of making it stick, and it's got to be authentic, is this. You've got to make it all about the people. Help them have a better life at work and at home. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mac Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mac's books, programs, special offers, certifications, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.